Hi, you've tuned into State of Southasia, a podcast from Himal Southasian, where we have the best minds on the region to unpack crucial issues affecting our politics, cultures, environments, and societies. I'm your host, Nayantara Narayanan, coming to you from Bangalore. On this episode, I speak to Ahmed Naish, a journalist from the Maldives, about a controversial new media regulation law in the country and the threats it poses to media freedoms. Before we go further, here's a reminder that Himal is an independent magazine completely free of corporate and government interest. Your support means the world to us. Help our in-depth journalism by becoming a paying patron for as little as $5 a month. Visit our website himalmag.com and click on Support Himal. On the 18th of September, Maldives President Mohammad Muizzu ratified a new media law aimed at streamlining media regulation and seeking to curb disinformation. The law allowed the creation of a new commission with extensive powers, including the ability to block news websites, suspend media outlets' registrations, issue fines to journalists, and to criminalize vague offences such as spreading fake news. There was a huge outcry and pushback in the country against the controversial bill that critics say could muzzle media freedom and stifle free speech. The journalist associations pledged to defy the bill, and the main opposition party called for protests against it, and a global press freedom group urged Muizzu to veto the legislation. Yet the Muizzu government, which enjoys a supermajority, was able to push the bill through Parliament. Ahmed Naish, editor at the Maldives Independent, joins me on the podcast today. He's been covering the story in detail, and he's here now to take us through what's been happening. Naish, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's look at some of the provisions of this law one by one. The first is actually the reconstitution of the old media regulatory bodies. They've been dismantled, and now the government has created the Maldives Media and Broadcasting Commission, which is a sort of super regulator with powers to oversee broadcast, print, and online media. Naish, what is the composition of this body and how will it operate?
The new commission is made up of 7 members. It's the merger of the old regulatory bodies, which were 2 separate bodies for broadcasting and print and online media. There was a 7-member broadcasting commission and a 15-member media council. The first regulated television and radio, and the council, which is based on a self-regulatory model, regulated print and online media. So this new commission is a merger of the old regulatory bodies. It's made up of 7 members. 4 members of the commission are representatives of the media. They're elected directly by media outlets. So this election took place actually last week, but in part due to a boycott from most mainstream outlets, there was no election, and 4 members were elected unopposed, as they were the only 4 candidates stood for the post. And they've since been, actually yesterday, they were formally appointed. So how that works is there were 2 slots for broadcasters, and only 2 candidates stood for those 2 posts. And there were 2 for the rest of the media, that is print and online, and only 2 also stood for those. And therefore, there was no need for an election, and all 4. So they were formally appointed yesterday by the President's office. And the other 3 slots are to be selected by Parliament. And at yesterday's sitting, 10 candidates have stood for the post. And they are to be selected by Parliament following a vetting process by a committee, which is going on as we speak, I think.
Right. And there's also concern about how the members of the commission from the media organizations can also be dismissed by Parliament, right?
Yes, all of the members, including the 4 members representing the media, can be dismissed by Parliament. This is through a no confidence motion. And in addition to that, the Parliament will also appoint the president of the commission, who has the power to set the agenda and oversee administrative matters.
And in a situation where, like, this government that has a supermajority and basically controls parliament, that means that this commission really does not have any autonomy if they can be appointed and dismissed at will, right?
Like most other independent bodies in the country, it's understood that the members of these independent bodies serve at the pleasure of the ruling party,
Mm-hmm.
which in the past two elections have won a supermajority of parliament, and therefore they have unchecked power, untrammeled authority to dismiss and appoint members at will. So it's understood that if anyone steps out of line, it will be a very simple process for the parliament to dismiss them.
Speaking of stepping out of line, the new law empowers the Commission to take action against media outlets that they deem have contravened the law or a code of ethics. And it even allows authorities to suspend media licenses until investigations are complete, to file litigation and seek cancellation of these licenses. It even allows them to send police to stop broadcasts midway if they're seen to be violating the new law. So, do we have any idea of what this code of ethics is? And does this give really the Commission sweeping powers to clamp down on media organizations?
Yes, the law states that the commission should formulate this code of ethics within 3 months. So there is
Mhm.
within 3 months of ratification. So that's by December 18th or 19th, I think. But since the full commission isn't in place yet, the process I don't think has started yet. But yes, like you said, the commission has sweeping powers. Actually, but the one of the most troubling provisions in the law was removed during the committee stage. During the legislative process, actually, the Attorney General and the government's line in response to the pushback by the journalism community had been that any complaints, concerns will be addressed during the committee stage. And a lot of changes were actually made by the committee before the bill was passed. This included um, taking out the provision that allowed the commission to suspend broadcasts or block websites during investigation. So that
Okay.
provision is not in the final act. Regardless, the commission still has the initially to order retractions, order apologies, corrections, and impose fines of up to $6,500 on broadcasters, and to revoke licenses or suspend broadcasting licenses through court orders.
Government officials have kind of said that this law will not be used to police individual social media users. That was another big concern. But it still remains that the language of the provisions of the law are vague enough that maybe the government at some point could use it to go after individual social media users and creators. Is that still a worry despite the government assurances now?
Yes, this was one of the major bones of contention during the whole debate over the bill. The government was adamant that it does not target, or it does not, the new law does not allow targeting social media. But several lawyers and former attorneys general pointed out that the definition of electronic media in the law was broad enough that it could target anyone who disseminates information or news on social media. And so that this could apply to TikTok users or anyone with an X account who publishes information on current affairs or news. Having said that, what's happened over the past week, that's not in connection with this law, but under the existing laws, under the Penal Code, has been that two opposition activists last week have had their phones confiscated by the police over social media posts. It's not specific to this law. The current existing laws allow the government to target social media.
And so, in an atmosphere using other laws to do it anyway, they might use this law as well to continue that line of persecution for people who are generally critical of the government, is it?
Yes, in this case, it was two prominent female activists. They were accused of inciting violence, in one in a Facebook post and the other in an X post. In terms of the media, the law is pretty clear that it applies to the social media accounts of media outlets. But the disagreement is whether the government has, like I said, been adamant that it does not apply. It solely applies to media personnel, to media workers. and any social media accounts of media outlets, and that ordinary people who use social media will not be targeted under this law.
Right, but it remains to be seen how really it'll be used. Next, we've talked about the composition of the commission, this code of ethics, what that might look like. But what are other provisions of concern to you?
From the beginning, the Journalists Association, the main concern that they've raised is that a lot of the provisions are overly broad and vague. For instance, the Commission could target content deemed to be endangering national security, endangering public order, and the fear is that these are vague enough and broad enough to allow the Commission to go after critical news websites in particular. The concern from the beginning has been that for the past 15 years, print and online media has been regulated by the Media Council, sorry, which was a 15-member body, of which 8 were directly elected by the media. And the government's stance has been that self-regulation has failed and that the Media Council had been largely toothless and unable to address widespread defamation and disinformation, especially on online news outlets. In the Maldives, with the exception of one print daily newspaper, all of the media is online, on digital, on websites, and most people read or rely on news websites for information. And this fell under the old legal framework. It fell under the Media Council, which was before the new law came in. The vast majority of complaints that the Commission received came from the President's office, and in particular, they targeted one outlet. It's called Aladu. It's under the new administration, which came into power in November 2023. It had become I would say, the principal platform for adversarial journalism in the country. This law has been seen, the purpose of the law has been seen as allowing the government to target this outlet in particular.
You said that the government had said that media self-regulation had failed, but do you think it's failed in the Maldives? I mean, I'm sure there are things that media councils can always do to ensure better standards of journalism. But do you think self-regulation has failed?
Well, according to the members of the bodies themselves, they weren't able to fulfill the mandate. I think there is consensus or agreement that it hadn't been that effective, but this was largely blamed on a lack of resources and a budget for the Media Council. According to the outgoing council president, the budget was about 3 million annually, Maldivian rupiah. And according to the council, that was only enough to basically keep the lights on and pay staff, but not enough to have an ombudsperson, for instance, or legal expertise to adjudicate cases properly. And when the council and the Broadcasting Commission appeared before the parliamentary committee that was reviewing this bill, they did warn that the problem isn't really about the law so much as about lack of resources. That even if you formed a new commission without a proper budget, that it couldn't function or deliver the mandate.
Right. And what would that mandate be? Is fake news and disinformation a big concern in the media landscape in the Maldives?
I would say yes, that it is. But the main justification from the government and the ruling party was that there is this, according to them, this unchecked epidemic of this defamation and slander happening on social media and on these news websites. But there is a civil remedy in place for defamation. This is what critics have pointed out, that in the case of defamation, that any politician who feels that they've been defamed or slandered can go to court and seek a civil remedy. And earlier this year, for instance, the First Lady herself filed a defamation suit against the opposition party, the main opposition party, an activist who made remarks about his son during an opposition protest. The mechanism is in place for people to seek remedies through the civil court in the case of defamation. In the case of disinformation, There is a broader debate, I would say, but in my opinion, I don't think the mainstream media is that irresponsible when it comes to disinformation. It's largely been a problem with unregistered outlets that crop up online. It's very easy to set up a news website. And earlier in the administration, about three websites were blocked on the orders of the president's office by the Communications Authority of the Maldives, which is a government body. But following an outcry from media advocates, they were later unblocked. And I think this was in part an admission that you can't really regulate these unfettered digital spaces. But disinformation is a problem on social media, and this law, by its own admission, really doesn't target or address that problem.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's also a requirement in this law that all media outlets need to be registered. Do you think that that is warranted, or is that also an excess? Is it just a way to kind of clamp down on media freedom?
Most media outlets are registered in the country. There are different views on this. One view is that it is a regressive requirement. And there is concern that giving this power to the commission, and the law explicitly states that it is an offense, or at least that it's not permissible to operate a news outlet or put out a newspaper without registration anymore. So this makes it an offense, whereas it was a gray area under the old law. That the requirement was more of a formality. Again, it remains to be seen once the new commission is in place. Currently, since the law was passed about less than a month ago now, the old Broadcasting Commission and the Media Council were dissolved, and an interim committee made up of civil servants is now acting as the media regulator until this new commission can function fully. But like I said, 4 members have already been appointed, and we're expecting Parliament to appoint the other 3, probably over the course of the next 2 weeks, if not next week, and the new commission will come into place, and then we'll see how it functions.
Right. So, of the many things that are down on paper, there's much that remains to be seen in the way how the actual commission will work, how they will implement things. But in June, I spoke to the journalist JJ Robinson on this podcast about protests in the Maldives against political corruption and nepotism. JJ described the Maldives as a free for all kleptocracy with a political culture of corporatized corruption and political intimidation through gangs. You can listen to that episode on Himal's podcast channels on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to that in the episode notes. Himal Podcast brings you the best conversations with top thinkers on South Asia so that you can understand this region, which is home to a quarter of humanity, better. Himal brings you cross-border stories that you won't find anywhere else. It takes a lot to do this kind of in-depth independent journalism, and we rely on listeners like you. You can support the magazine by becoming a paying patron. Click on the link in the episode notes or go to our website himalmag.com and click Support Himal. You can also sign up to our newsletters to keep up with our latest stories, events, and more. Now, back to our conversation with Ahmed Naish. Naish, the Maldives has struggled to consolidate its democracy since 2008. But despite having a constitution that allows for multi-party elections, a separation of powers, protection of human rights, and stronger institutions, there have been signs of democratic decline, some of which JJ also referred to in the episode that he did earlier this year. The control of the media and the persecution of journalists has been a big factor in that democratic decline. Can you take us through that big picture of what the media landscape has been in the Maldives over the years?
Yes, as you said, the Maldives is still a relatively young democracy. We had the first multi-party elections in 2008, the same year that the new democratic constitution was adopted. But Press freedom precedes the constitution by a few years. The first independent outlets were registered around 2005, and there was a new opening up of space for free expression. Since then, it's been a mixed picture. This has been reflected in the Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index, where the Maldives made huge strides after the first democratic election, particularly following the decriminalization of defamation in 2009. The position on the Press Freedom Index peaked in 2009, I think, with when the Maldives was ranked around 52 on the index. But since then, I would say press freedom has largely been intertwined with the fortunes of democracy. It's waxed and waned depending on the health of the democracy in the country. There's been, we've experienced this personally when in 2014, our journalist Ahmed was abducted in August 2014. He was never found, but a presidential inquiry commission set up after the change of government in 2018 concluded that he had been abducted and murdered by a local affiliate of Al Qaeda. Again, in 2013, just before the election, the studios of Raja TV, which at the time was the most popular opposition-aligned TV station that was probably had the largest viewership in the country. Its studios were set on fire, and there have been other cases of attacks on journalists. And to this date, there hasn't been any justice, any accountability for a lot of these crimes against journalists. And this has led to a legacy of impunity that has cast a shadow over press freedom to this date. The other main issue, the recurring problem facing the media has been a lack of financial independence. This partly stems from the small size of the media. So there are a lot of about probably more than 200 news websites catering to a very small. Most of these outlets are in the local Divahi language, the unique language of the Maldives. But this caters to a resident Maldivian population of about 380,000 people. So there is massive competition among these outlets to be the first for breaking news in competing for eyeballs, basically. But the main problem over the years has been financial independence. Most of the media are dependent on advertising revenue from state-owned enterprises. And this is doled out. This isn't allocated on a merit-based, through a merit-based process. So this has given successive governments a tool for leverage over the media, and the media is dependent on basically government subsidies to function. It gives governments power over coverage and allows governments to exercise censorship. And there have been cases of editors asking to take down critical news stories, or more commonly, editors exercising self-censorship because they are dependent on a handful of these large government-owned companies to survive. So those are the main factors.
Right. And it is in this environment that this new law also comes in. There has been significant international condemnation of this law. Reporters Without Borders has called for its withdrawal. The International Federation of Journalists condemned the bill. The Committee to Protect Journalists also expressed concern over it. But the government went ahead and passed the law. But has the government responded to that kind of international criticism or even internal criticism in any way?
Yes, throughout the process, they have responded. The Attorney General and the Information Minister, who is a former journalist, their line has basically been that throughout the process that the government has been willing to address any concerns through the committee stage, to bring any changes, to listen to grievances of journalists represented by the Maldives Journalists Association, which is the de facto union of the Maldivian journalism community. But the MJA's position has always been that this law um, was fundamentally flawed and ill-intentioned, and that their position, their stance throughout the 1 month process that it took from submission to ratification had been that it should be withdrawn, and that there should be a longer process where the the media is properly consulted, where there is industry consultation, and for a new law to be passed, to be drafted with closer consultation with the industry. And the IFJ, the International Federation of Journalists, in their criticism, uh, highlighted this lack of consultation as one of the main issues. The bill came out, no one was expecting it. The bill was submitted one day and then taken up the next day through expedited processes in Parliament. And it was put up for debate very quickly. And then Parliament went into recess, and we thought it would be taken up after recess when it returned earlier this month. But then Parliament returned during recess to hold extraordinary sittings, and very quickly passed the law in a rushed process. This allowed Parliament to bypass normal procedures, where, I mean, for instance, on the day that it was passed, when the bill was put up to a vote, the final version of the bill with the changes brought by the committee was not made public. The bill was not available until a few hours after it was actually passed into law. So these were many of the concerns that journalists raised during the process. One of which was a lot of the review process by the committee happened in secret. The committee actually held closed meetings to review the bill. And in one instance, this was unprecedented, and I have never seen anything like this. When journalists went to the committee to observe the meeting, they were forcibly evicted manhandled and taken out of the committee for Parliament security. So this was completely unprecedented in parliamentary history. So this was the backdrop in which the law was passed.
So, what do you think comes next? You spoke about there is some of this wait and watch to see how exactly the commission will be constituted and how it will eventually work. But are journalists continuing to push back against this law? Is there any chance of the government changing or amending any provisions to make it less, draconian, for lack of another word?
Yes, so before the bill was passed, a petition was submitted to both Parliament and the President's office, signed by about more than 150 journalists. So this represents the vast majority of journalists practicing in the country. So it represents a consensus view among the journalism community. Having said that, to be fair, there are journalists who work with more government-aligned outlets that are in favor of this bill. They believe that there should be more stringent regulation. But the Maldives Journalists Association from the beginning has been strongly opposed to the bill. And once, after all of the lobbying and the many protests outside Parliament, outside the President's office, when the government and the ruling party went ahead with the law, despite all of these protests, the Maldives Journalists Association has come together and basically decided to challenge the law, to defy the law, and to follow the example of our neighboring country, Sri Lanka, and to form a new rival self-regulatory body. So the MJA is in the process of forming this new self-regulatory body. They will follow the example of the Sri Lankan Press Complaints Commission. And it is now in the process of setting up this new commission that will serve as a rival body to the official one. And it will, as I understand, it will handle complaints from the public. And it will be a voluntary industry body where media, I think most mainstream outlets will be represented on the body.
Mhm.
So I think that is the path forward, where the the, uh, the the journalism community will set up this rival body and go forward. But um, as you said, it remains to be seen how the commission will act. Uh, the law will still apply regardless of the defiance. So the commission will have the power, particularly in cases of non-compliance with the law. For instance, if it investigates a complaint against any media outlet, an online outlet, or a newspaper, and if this outlet decides to not comply, that is, refuses to issue a correction, a retraction, or a public apology, then the commission can go ahead with taking these actions under the law, uh, which will include these hefty fines and ultimately revocation of registration, um, which would mean that that these outlets will find it very difficult to operate in the Maldives. So this is what remains to be seen once the commission is in place, I think, by the end of the month.
Well, Naish, my final question to you is for three recommendations. These could be books or movies or other podcasts on the issues of press freedom or even like broader questions of democracy in the Maldives.
Yes, for a foreign audience, I would recommend two books by our former editors of the Maldives Independent, which used to be called Mini One News, which meant independent in the way. One is by J.J. Robinson. It's called The Maldives, Islamic Republic, Tropical Autocracy. It covers his 4 years in the Maldives, during which there was a transfer of power. And the second is by his successor, Daniel Bosley. It's called Descent into Paradise, again covering his years in the Maldives and wide travels across the country. Um, for a film, there have been very few films made about the Maldives, but I think the most famous one was a documentary that came out in 2011. It's called The Island President. It covers former President Nasheed's advocacy during the Copenhagen Climate Summit.
Yeah, Nasheed famously held that underwater press conference at the time, didn't he?
Yes, this movie covers all of that and more. The underwater cabinet meeting and shows behind the scenes footage of his advocacy during the climate summit in Copenhagen in 2009.
Naish, actually, I'm just going to ask you one more question, and that really is about the journey of the Maldives Independent itself, because I think that kind of showcases what journalists have had to face. So, could you quickly take us through that journey?
Yes, so the Maldives Independent, formerly called Mini One News, was actually formed in exile in 2004 in Sri Lanka, again reflecting the fortunes of press freedom and democracy in the Maldives. But after the election in 2008, well, it was actually set up by the MDP, the Maldivian Democratic Party. So it, it was part of a wider media organization under the Mini One umbrella, which included radio and print newspaper. But after Nasheed won in 2008, the MDP decided to basically shut down the radio and the newspaper. But the Minimum News website operated even at the time independently of the newspaper and the radio, and it was led by a small team of foreign editors, uh, mainly British editors. And after 2009, we decided to keep going and um, moved away from the affiliation with the MDP and tried to function as an independent outlet. And in 2015, we rebranded as the Maldives Independent. Um, Along the way, we faced many troubling times. Our office was raided in 2015 after the release of an Al Jazeera documentary, which our former editor helped produce and appear in. This exposed the largest corruption scandal in the Maldives. And after this, she was forced into exile in September 2016. Um, but we managed to function uh, throughout those difficult times. But unfortunately, in 2020, due to a number of reasons, we had to shut down, mainly due to difficulties with funding. But exactly 5 years after a hiatus of exactly 5 years, we've relaunched in January this year, and we've been now publishing for the last 8 months.
Well, it is great to have the Maldives Independent back, and good luck to you, Naish, with everything. We look forward to a lot more great journalism from you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
That was Ahmed Naish on the State of Southasia podcast. You'll find his recommendations and much more in the episode notes. You'll find stories by J.J. Robinson and Daniel Bosley on the Himal website. They have been contributors to Himal. If you like this episode, leave us a comment or write to us at editorial@himalmag.com. Tell us what you want to hear about on this podcast. Don't forget to tune in to the South Asia Review of Books podcast with Himal's Shweta Srikantan next week. She will be speaking to the Indian writer Amrita Mahale on her new novel Real Life, a literary mystery set in the Himalayas. You can also tune into our special podcast series Saffron Siege, hosted by the peace activist Harsh Mandar, on the 100-year legacy of the RSS and its corrosion of public life in India. Don't miss this essential set of conversations with prominent scholars and observers of India's politics and society. Follow the Himal South Asian podcast channel on your podcast app to find all our latest episodes, and you can share, rate, and review them. You can also sign up to our newsletters to keep up with Himal's work. This episode was edited by Ritika Chauhan. We'll be back soon with another in-depth conversation on the next episode of State of South Asia with me, Nayantara Narayanan. Thank you for listening, and see you then.